This is a week 1 video for ecn110 Principles of Economics. I want to use this video to talk about what is economics. Sort of answers the question or poses the question to you, why are you here? So let's talk a little bit about what economics is and sort of differentiate the different types of economics that we'll be talking about during the class. Well, what is economics? I think the textbook definition says that economics is the study of choices in production and consumption. That's a nice definition. What does it mean? Well, let me use the next couple slides to define a little bit more about what that really means, choices in production and consumption. Economics is a study of how people and organizations choose to allocate their resources. And typically when we're talking, if you think of yourself, you have two types of resources. You have time and you have money. That's pretty much it. Organizations, businesses, companies, nonprofits, the government, they have the same thing. They have time or they have money. And from that perspective, they have to make choices about how they allocate that. Okay, that's basically the concept of the study of economics, is choices. So let's talk a little bit about why economics exists. Well, the key concept of economics, or the underlying concept of economics, is scarcity. You have a finite amount of time, you have a finite amount of money, and if you're a company, you have a finite amount of production resources. You know, you have a factory. You don't have infinite factories, you have one factory. And you have to make decisions about how to utilize that time, money, production resources. Well, the concept of scarcity therefore implies that you have to have trade-offs. You can't do everything, you can't have everything. Right? You have to decide how to spend spend your finite resources, how to spend your time, how to spend your money, how to utilize your production resources. So trade-offs, by definition, involve decisions. You must decide how to allocate those scarce resources. So what's economics? Well, economics is a study of how people make those decisions. You know, we've got this concept of scarcity, we've got these trade-offs people make. Economics is basically the study of how people deal with making decisions given that resources are finite. Here's a couple examples here. This class, you're taking this class. Hopefully you're taking this class if you're listening to my video. You have finite time and you have finite money. You need to decide how to spend it. So you've made a decision to come here and take this class. You've decided to commit the 10 hours or so per week it's going to take this class and complete it. Now, I know it's a required class, so perhaps think about it in terms of this degree program. But you've decided to make a commitment to come here and take this class. Now, you could be home watching TV. You could be at the gym working out. You could actually be earning money by working someplace. I mean, if you have a salaried job someplace, you could get a part-time job making, $10 an hour as, someone working in Walmart, the greeter in Walmart, or, part-time job at a, McDonald's or something making hamburgers. I mean, you could actually be earning more money by not being here. You're paying to be here. You could earn more money by working. You could have leisure time at the gym and improve your health. You could be watching TV and sort of doing nothing. But for some reason, you have made a decision involving scarcity to allocate your time towards this class, which basically means that you see economic value from coming into this class and taking the class. There are benefits to taking this class where you see the value beyond the alternatives. Okay, that's the basic concept of economics. Is we're studying in economics why people make decisions the way they do, how they decide to spend their scarce resources. And that's a core concept of economics, and everything you see here, every decision you conceptually make has some allocation of economics in it. You may not have heard it before, you may not have heard the term before, but I think as we go through the class, you'll see that these everyday decisions you make often are very, very much involved on economic concepts. So back one page here. The study of economics, why does economics exist? The study of economics. Economics is sort of a quantitative science, there's a bunch of numbers, and it's also a social science. It's no different than psychology and sociology in terms of how we study, the bottom line here, how we study how people make decisions. That's a social science element. Okay, let's talk about some key terms that we've got for this class. There's really a couple different terms. Microeconomics. You'll hear the terms microeconomics and macroeconomics. Okay, microeconomics is a study of how individuals and firms make decisions, as well as how they interact with each other through market mechanisms. So micro focuses on small, actions of individuals, actions of individual firms. If you turn that concept around, we have macroeconomics, which is the study of the economy as a whole. So microeconomics is sort of this social science thing where we study how you react to different things. We raise the price of meals at the restaurant, so you eat less meals at the restaurant, or something like that. We give you a raise, you have more money, so conceptually you spend more money and buy higher value products or something. That's the kind of the concept of microeconomics. Macroeconomics is this process whereby which we study the whole economy. And that's kind of the global scientific piece, mathematical piece of economics. So what are we trying to learn in this class? Well, we're trying to talk about the problems that are studied in microeconomics. We're also going to talk about the problems that are studied in macroeconomics. And also, we're going to talk a lot about the methods that economists use to study the world, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. We'll talk about how economists do this, and some of these models are mathematical. A lot of material presented in the textbook is kind of mathematical. I will stress for you the social science element and sort of the concept of how people think and make decisions. Another piece of economics is that, stress this a few more times, is people, at least in the study of economics, are thought to always do things that are in their best interest. When they make a decision, they're doing things at least they perceive to be in their best interest. You've chosen to be here in this class, for example, because you perceive it to be in your best interest. You perceive it in some way to be more valuable to you to spend these 10 hours per weekend and whatever the tuition costs are to be in this class rather than sitting home watching television. That may or may not be true. Presumably it is, or we all wouldn't be here. But you've chosen to make that decision. Others who are not here are sitting home watching television. We have a finite number of people in this class. Fortunately for the professor, we have a finite number of people. Couldn't grade the whole world. But there's a finite number of people. So there's that element in here of studying what you're doing as a social scientist, and then the macro piece is we're studying it as a data element. There's some key takeaways. Okay, so microeconomics, we study the decisions of individual entities, firms, households, etc. We also study how these organizations interact with each other. Macroeconomics, we study the economy overall, why economies grow, why they sometimes experience recessions. So in the class, we sort of start out the first couple weeks with microeconomic concepts. How do you make decisions? What do you think? What do households think? What do firms think? How do they decide what to do? Macroeconomics, then we sort of move on and say, okay, now that we understand how everybody interacts with each other, let's study the economy as a whole and talk about what the role of the government is, what the role of the government isn't, what the role of various organizations that are involved in the economic policy making for the government are and do. And this sort of my description is to help you understand perhaps what's on the front page of the paper, to perhaps help you understand why there was recession, perhaps why there still is recession. things like that. Okay, but so we progress from the social science piece to the mathematical piece. And then we're going to study the effects of government policy on the overall economy. And again, as you progress through the class, we've got some questions, some discussions later on, some papers later on about different things the government does and doesn't do that affect the economic policy, and we get to look back at historical events that have occurred. And finally, we're going to look at how economists gather data about the world and then build models that explain these data and make predictions. And I want to stress this here is an element. Economists gather data about the world and then build models. So it's not a perfect science. It's not like we're doing algebra here or arithmetic or something like that and adding up all the prices someplace. Economists work in kind of this abstract world where they have models. They take data, then they build models to help explain what's happening and predict things. You've probably all seen or heard, the government predicts, well, if we raise taxes, then so many businesses will raise so much more revenue, or so many businesses will leave, or something like that. Where you've heard this. Well, we can raise taxes and we get more money, or we can lower taxes and we might get more money if we lower taxes because more people will pay taxes, or something like that. It's a prediction based on a model. We have this data. We know what happened last time. We think we know, kind of at the top, microeconomics, how people will react to things. Based on how they react to things, we say, well, if we do this, then globally, then so many people will take actions, and we'll get more money, get less money, that type of thing. And firms make the same decisions, you make the same decisions, but it's based on models that explain those behaviors. So economics has this kind of model, inexact element to it. It's imprecise. We take data and make predictions, and like anything else, there's probably 2 or 3 different major concepts in economics, major schools of thought in economics that one person says, well, if you do this, this, and this, my prediction says revenue will go up, and somebody else says, no, if you do this, this, and this, revenue will go down based on my prediction. And then, of course, somebody has to try it and figure out what actually happens to revenue. And we're going to see a lot of examples of that later in the class when we talk about some of the things, the current recession, the Great Depression of the 30s, some of the activities of President Reagan and some others in the 70s, 80s, and things like that, where they kind of came through and changed different things in the tax structure and in the government structure, and sort of see what happened and how it shakes out. From this basis, you'll hopefully be able to understand what economists are doing, and hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit better about how people are making decisions from a business perspective. How people decide to buy your products, not buy your products, what they're going to do if you raise the price, what they're going to do if you lower the price, what they're going to do if you give them a raise, what they're going to do if you don't give them a raise, things like that. I mean, that's really, from a business perspective, where we're trying to go with this class.